Pardon me, but it appears my car is experiencing some issues. We advise you to settle your remaining balance promptly. Failure to do so will result in your card remaining inactive. What? The customer service representative from the card company did mention an outstanding balance. It seems the payment from my usual credit card hasn't been processed yet. But why? Should have a significant amount saved in the account designated for automatic payments. However, upon checking my bank balance, it shows $0. The only other individual with access to withdraw funds from it would be my husband. With a sense of urgency, I reached for my mobile phone and swiftly reported to the police. I'm Garnett Felton, 30 years old, and I operate as a freelance web designer, setting my own tempo. Thanks to the flexibility of my job, I frequently meet clients face-to-face despite the option of virtual meetings. Though virtual interactions are feasible, I find that direct communication better conveys my concepts. As deadlines loom, I immerse myself in work, sacrificing sleep for productivity. My ability to sustain this pace is largely due to the unwavering support of my husband Thomas, whom I married just a year ago. A couple of years ago, when I was tasked with a project at a company, he was the liaison I dealt with. We dated for a year and a half before tying the knot. Following our wedding, he relocated to my apartment. However, a significant issue has emerged in my life revolving around Thomas's parents. They have a lax approach to finances and often find themselves strapped for cash. Thomas and I divide our living costs evenly. Given my higher income, I typically cover all expenses for the month, with him reimbursing me half at the start of the subsequent month. However, when I mentioned this month's expenses to Thomas as usual, he seemed annoyed and remarked, "Look, money's a bit tight right now. Can I settle my share of the living expenses after my next paycheck?" What do you mean by tight? I'm only asking for half of the living expenses. Yeah, I get that, but I'm completely strapped until my next payday. What do you mean? It's only been 10 days since you got paid. His evasiveness and reluctance to clarify started to irk me. His deliberate ambiguity prompted me to delve deeper. Hey, can you please explain why you can't pay properly? And what's this about assisting your parents? Well, you see, is there something you're suspicious about? No, not at all. I simply assisted my mom and dad. Assisted? Yeah, they mentioned they were facing some difficulties, so I sent them some money. Thomas's parents were supposed to be financially stable. My father-in-law held a full-time job, while my mother-in-law worked part-time. So, why did they suddenly require financial assistance? This question had been nagging at me, and I couldn't shake it. Why do your parents need financial support if they're both employed? This hasn't been necessary in the past. I've been assisting them for a while now. They recently requested an increase in the amount, starting this month. You didn't actually agree to increase the amount, did you? Yes, I did. Though the issue of helping one's parents in need is understandable, I couldn't help but feel unsettled by this revelation. All right, just ensure you settle your share when you receive your paycheck at the end of the month. Agreed. My husband has a stubborn streak that's hard to break once he's made up his mind. While I adore him, his trait does lead to some challenges. I knew trying to reason further wouldn't sway him, and apologies weren't exactly his forte. So, I opted to refrain from pushing the issue and waited patiently till the next payday. Since that incident, he's been consistently finding excuses to avoid contributing to our household expenses. And when he does chip in, it's only a fraction of what's needed. It's been nearly 6 months of him refusing to pull his weight. While we're technically still married, my patience is wearing thin. Not only am I covering all the bills, but I'm also responsible for all the household chores. Reflecting on this situation left me feeling foolish and overwhelmed with a sense of emptiness. One late night, he stumbled in, his cheeks flushed from alcohol. Unable to contain my frustration, I raised my voice. Why did you call if you were going to be out drinking? I made dinner and waited for you. Sorry. A colleague unexpectedly invited me out. But couldn't you have sent a message? I asked you before to keep me informed. It's not fair to leave me hanging. Don't start yelling the moment I walk in. It's not welcoming. What do you mean? Why am I the one being blamed? He shot me a look of disdain, as if I were in the wrong. His attitude infuriated me, and I confronted him. How can you afford to go drinking when you can't even contribute to our bills? I can enjoy a drink occasionally. I'm exhausted from working every day. So am I. I handle all the household chores. If you can't contribute anymore, can't we stop sending money to your parents? What? Why? That's my family's business. It's not your concern. And what about us, Thomas? Aren't we family too? What am I to you, living here with you after we got married? This is so irritating. What does it matter? You earn more than I do anyway. Why does he feel so entitled? The only reason Thomas can live comfortably is because I'm shouldering all the expenses. Would a simple thank you or sorry for the inconvenience be too much to ask? I was left speechless by his irrational arguments. I couldn't fathom his arrogance. Given our escalating tempers, I realized a rational conversation was unlikely and suggested, let's revisit this tomorrow. The following day, while preparing dinner and awaiting his return, I heard the front door creak open. Welcome home, I called out, but received no response. Then the living room door swung open, and in walked my husband with his parents. Mom, Dad, what brings you here? With a smug grin, my husband interjected, my parents have something they want to discuss with you. To discuss with me? Come on, Mom and Dad, let's get to the point. Prompted by my husband, my father-in-law began to look apologetic. Apologies for the sudden visit. We've come to talk about the financial support Thomas has been providing us. What's this about? Oh, Ernest, could you please ease up on Thomas? Surprised, I blurted out, what? I was completely bewildered. Then my mother-in-law, who had remained silent, spoke up. Garnett, Thomas has been sending us money each month, thinking of our well-being. It's unfair for you to accuse him. What are you saying? Accusations. All I'm asking for is our living expenses to be managed properly. Listen, Garnett, I hate to bring this up, but we're practically family, aren't we? If your own family were struggling, wouldn't you lend a hand? What? That's what anyone would expect, right? Your father-in-law and I have been experiencing financial strain lately, so we rely on Thomas to continue supporting us. Therefore, you should handle all the living expenses for both of you. It seemed they assumed it was only natural for me to shoulder all the costs. Unable to tolerate it any longer, I lashed out. Enough is enough. What do you think I've been doing? Managing all the household chores and covering every living expense. How is that fair? Isn't it what married couples do? Support each other, right? Or are you just that selfish? Upon hearing his mother's taunt, my husband, sitting beside me, couldn't suppress a chuckle. That evening, despite my efforts to reason, they remained obstinate. They finally departed well past 9 p.m. Once they were gone, my husband abruptly handed me signed divorce papers. In disbelief, I questioned, what's this? It means exactly what it says, he retorted. Peering down at me, he declared, if you persist in defying me, I'll end our marriage. Are you serious? Absolutely. If you don't want a divorce, then simply obey. Your role is to follow, not lead. I knew I should have stood my ground, but I felt utterly drained. Perhaps trying to reason with Thomas before the situation worsened was futile. Perhaps divorce was the only option. The decision was swift. The following day, I signed the divorce papers Thomas had given me and headed to City Hall. The documents were processed, and just like that, I was single once more. Now that I'm finally liberated, I'll soon find my own place and embrace independent living. Feeling rejuvenated, I opted to indulge myself with a shopping trip to the department store. Working predominantly from home with outings limited to client meetings, it had been quite some time since I splurged on myself, especially given the recent strain of covering all expenses. Today, however, I've decided to treat myself. With that resolve, I ventured into the women's clothing section. After trying on a couple of dresses, I settled on 2 favorites. At the checkout, as I handed over my credit card, the cashier's troubled expression caught my attention. I'm sorry, ma'am. It seems we're unable to process this card. What? That's impossible. I've used it recently to purchase a new tablet for work without any issues. Why the sudden problem now? Racing home, I dialed the card company's number. Upon explaining the situation to the operator, she delivered startling news. We require immediate payment of the outstanding balance, or your card will be rendered unusable. Outstanding balance. Indeed, last month, we were unable to debit your card usage from your account. Is this plausible? Please verify your bank account balance. After ending the call, I swiftly accessed my bank account online, the very account from which my card draws funds. Initially reserved for personal savings, it now solely serves my card transactions. If memory serves, there should be $5 million within, but the balance reads 0. Just before the card's due date, the entire $5 million had been withdrawn. What on earth was happening? A chilling suspicion gripped me. Could it have been Thomas? But who else had access? Our bank book and ATM card were stored together, only accessible to the both of us, meaning Thomas was the only other person who could have withdrawn from my account. I waited for his return, then confronted him. "Hey, did you withdraw money from my account?" He smirked, let out an exasperated sigh, and replied, clearly irritated. "Oh, you figured it out. Thought I did a pretty good job of covering my tracks, huh? I can't believe this. Why would you do that?" "Why? For my parents, of course. I gave them your $5 million. What did you just say?" "Just as I said, they needed financial support. Fortunately, I have the means to provide it." Speechless, he began to explain, his tone tinged with pride. It appeared his parents had developed an obsession with online shopping. They were purchasing items they fancied, far exceeding their income. Initially, they turned to Thomas for assistance. However, as their spending spiraled out of control, they began to demand more. They started purchasing multiples of the same items, gifting them to neighbors. Before they knew it, their monthly expenses surpassed $500,000, a sum Thomas couldn't manage alone. So, he withdrew the $5 million from my account. After he finished explaining, he remarked, "You shouldn't complain. They're your family too. Consider it looking after them. Don't make a fuss over a mere $5 million. In that moment, I found myself dialing the police on my cell. "Hello, police. I want to report a break-in and theft. My address is..." Thomas watched me with wide eyes as I ended the call. He shouted, "Hey, what are you doing? Did you just call the police?" "Police? Why wouldn't I? There's been a break-in and theft, right?" "Calling it theft is exaggerating. This is my house," I firmly reminded a flustered Thomas. "We're no longer a couple. In fact, I'm the one renting this place, so technically, it's not your home, is it? We're not together anymore, remember? The divorce papers you signed yesterday, I'd already submitted them. So in other words, this is my place and you're just a stranger here, an intruder, right? You've got to be kidding me. Call them back and cancel the report." Waving my phone angrily at him, I warned, "If you lay a finger on me, I'll call the cops again. Just so you know, they're already on their way. You can't escape now. Why don't you just admit what you've done?" "Whoa, hold on. We loved each other, didn't we? How did it come to this?" "Love each other?" I scoffed. "Don't try to feed me that nonsense. Whose fault do you think all of this is?" "It all began because you blindly supported your irresponsible parents. You can't just act recklessly and expect forgiveness. Who would forgive someone as despicable as you? What a fool." "Fool? Do you even know who you're talking to?" "I'm talking to you. Like parents, like child. Because you were raised by parents who were careless with money, you think it's acceptable to deplete someone else's savings. I hope the police give you a stern lecture and you feel the weight of those $5 million. Just then, the police arrived and Thomas crumbled on the spot. "Who's the suspect?" Pointing at my husband, now cowering on the floor, I said, "It's him, without a doubt." "All right, let's go. You'll need to come in for questioning," the officer commanded. All I wanted was to support my parents, but my pleas fell on deaf ears, and Thomas was escorted away by the police. However, the authorities deemed the incident a civil matter, explaining they couldn't intervene. Determined to seek justice, I sought legal assistance and demanded compensation for the misappropriation of my $5 million in savings, along with damages totaling $6 million. Naturally, Thomas and his parents couldn't afford such a sum. In the end, all three found themselves drowning in debt. Despite their financial woes, his parents continued their reckless spending habits, accruing even more debt. They eventually resorted to borrowing from loan sharks, living in constant fear of relentless debt collectors, desperately trying to remain unseen. On the contrary, I made the bold decision to sever all ties with Thomas and relocated to a new apartment. Fortunately, my career began to thrive, and my income surpassed my wildest expectations. Since parting ways with Thomas, everything in my professional life fell into place. In hindsight, I regret not divorcing him sooner. Despite the failure of my marriage, I recognized that my life was far from over. Taking lessons from this experience, I resolved to exercise greater caution in my future endeavors.